Well, after the New Zealand mosque shootings, the House Judiciary Committee says it's time to take a closer look at the rise of white nationalism here in the United States. Hearings could happen next month, and it seems there's no sense of urgency, maybe because of the numbers. Statistics show there were more than 7,000 hate crimes in America in 2017. That's up 17% from 2016. And we all know in the cities where this happened: Pittsburgh, Charlottesville, Charleston. And on Friday, when asked about the threat of white nationalism, President Trump did not seem to see it as a major problem. Here's what he said.
You see today white nationalism as a rising threat around the world.
I don't really. I think it's a small group of people that have very, very serious problems. I guess if you look at what happened in New Zealand, perhaps that's a case. I don't know enough about it yet. They're just learning about the person and the people involved. But it's certainly a terrible thing, terrible thing.
Joining me now, Tony McAleer. He is a former skinhead recruiter and organizer for the White Aryan Nation. He is now a co-founder and board chair member of a group called Life After Hate. So, Tony, thank you for taking the time to be with us. First, I just want to get your reaction to what the president said. This is a small number of people who are very sick. Do you agree with that?
Well, the number is small, but thanks to technology, it doesn't mean they're any less dangerous. This is not a widespread terrorist threat, but it's definitely a terrorist threat, and it's becoming international. And
I think we point to the increase, right? We say 17% increase over just 1 year from 2016 to 2017. And the technology, as you say, these people are being radicalized online. But I think a lot of us wonder, what does that look like? Can you walk us through it?
Sure. I mean, when I was active, back in the day, pre-internet, you had to order a book, and it might take a month to get there, and then you might order a different one, and it would take weeks, and it took months or years really to radicalize. Now you can binge watch an ideology in a weekend, right? And there's no limit to the pace that you can consume this information. The speed at which you can consume it is your only limit, and so it's happening in days and weeks and months, not months and years. So it's quite rapid, and we're coming across more and more cases where people aren't joining or belonging to organized groups. They're going straight from online radicalization to horrific acts of violence, like in Charleston, with very little human contact in between. And that's the danger and the concern of the internet. It's an amplifier. And it doesn't really care which message it amplifies.
And an important part of this conversation, who are these people that are being preyed on for recruitment, and why is it so successful? We're talking about these young men who need a place to belong, and they sort of see this as an opportunity to pluck them out of their situation and give them that sense of community, and just how dangerous that can be.
Right, and research shows that the #1 correlated factor in the history of someone joining a violent extremist group is childhood trauma, and beyond that, emotional trauma. And that's what creates the vulnerability. I want to be clear here, it's not an excuse,
right?
But it creates the vulnerability. And people looking, for myself, for example, I got a sense of power when I felt powerless, acceptance when I felt unlovable, and attention when I felt invisible. And those are powerful psychological drivers that can make those choices seem to make sense, and people are a little bit lost. If we look at the histories of the ISIS guys in Brussels and carried out the attacks in Paris, you don't see scholars of the Quran. You find petty criminals with drug and violence histories, people that are troubled youth already. And when you don't have anything going on in your life, or you've got that feeling of things aren't working out, it's easy and it feels good to blame other people. And when an ideology comes along and offers you an excuse for your own failure or pain, offers a sense of power and a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning, it's not the ideology per se that draws people in, it's the promise and the lure, the false promise and the lure of these other things like acceptance, approval, and belonging.
But you got to wonder, how do we stop it? Because it's hard for us to imagine you go from such hate and such disgusting rhetoric to someone like you sitting here having an intelligent conversation with me on a national broadcast, coming from a place, I hope, that is not of hate, as you are reformed here. What do companies that are spreading this or giving a platform to these sick views need to do to stop this?
It's difficult, and we work with some of the biggest platforms to try and work through this issue, and it's not that simple, because I mean, the simple solution, ban the internet, but that's not practical. When you start play with keywords and limiting content, you often accidentally limit a pile of content that you didn't intend on banning. So it's finding that right balance and redirecting people that are searching for extremist content to resources that can off-ramp them or steer them away. But it's a very, very complex issue. I'm
just curious, what was the switch for you?
For me, it was the birth of my daughter and holding her in the delivery room, and she opened her eyes for the first time, and I connected to another human being since I couldn't remember when. I was disconnected. When we're in that place, I believe the level that we dehumanize other human beings is a mirror reflection of how internally disconnected and dehumanized we are. And with the birth of my son 15 months later and ending up being a single parent with them, they helped bring me back to my humanity with their compassion.
Well, you're an example that it's possible. The hope is that for those extremists out there, it's possible for them too. Tony, thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. No one is irredeemable.
Take care.